there was 160 in the group.
Oh.
Altogether across Canada. But those that were in that group were like me. Either their home was in Neepawa or they were teaching in Neepawa. And they were teachers, but they didn't necessarily teach in Neepawa.
Okay.
Yes, I never taught in Neepawa, but that was where I grew up. They put concerts on. Our group put on a concert one night, and one of the girls, one of the other teachers, and I both played violin.
Uh-huh.
And somebody told us that a couple of the men who were down were in the what do you call it? They were workmen, and that they played violin. And so they said they'd see if they could borrow these two violins, and which they did. And we both found them a little difficult to put under your chin because they reeked of tobacco. But anyway, it worked out. We had never played as a group before, but you do lots of things for the first time like this. We gave ourselves credit for being very well, having graduated from places we'd never heard tell of.
I noticed that you have Miss R. Fusey PDQ.
Yeah, PDQ. Somebody gave me that degree.
Oh.
Yeah.
And she's got Mrs. Ann Gray, RSVP.
RSVP.
Do you?
Roundtree.
Yeah. Do you remember him?
Well, not particularly, but it was his chocolate factory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I remember the chocolate. They gave us each a little box of chocolates. Yeah, it was a treat. Yeah. There would be an official, usually from the government, who would welcome us to express their thanks to the Canadian soldiers for what they had done for the country during the war. That was an important opportunity for them to send back to Canada their appreciation. It's very nice. There was a soldier on guard at that time. It was a touching ceremony from those that had survived for those that had fallen, you know. You thought of being, I think, there must have been a lot of the girls stir crazy to be living in that small little space, so many. I don't know how any of them survived. It was rather awful to see the piles of these things, because they weren't cleaned away yet. They were stacked in places to be removed, presumably, but they were still there. I wanted to find the grave of a neighbor boy. I knew it would mean a lot to his mother if I could tell her that I had visited his grave. And I had the required information, but when I got there, they told me that the fighting had moved back and forth through that area so that the cemetery where he was buried was destroyed. But there was, they built a memorial in the yard of a small white church not far away from where the other had been. And they built a column that had the names of all the soldiers who had been buried there and that was destroyed. And on this column I was able to find Fred Reed's name, who I was looking for. So I was glad that I could do that. My sister's brother-in-law was buried in the cemetery at Menongate Cemetery. I was able to find his grave. You know, it was amazing to think that of all these, they could give you the exact grave that you were looking for. You know, when you look at, and the little white crosses seem to stretch forever, well, it made you feel a little bit sick. Because you couldn't help thinking that all those graves, each one represented a young man who might have been a friend or a relative or whatever of anybody that you knew, you know. It really was a very depressing business to see, but still it was good to see that there was some future mark, some mark made for the future to see what they had done, had given their lives to. Yeah. The Canadian government was removing all the little white crosses and putting permanent stones on. How could I have been so fortunate to have this experience? Well, of course I know that it was thanks to my grandmother who had left me some money, and my father had invested it. I was only 3 years old when she died, so it had had quite a little while to grow. I'm just fortunate to have enough gray matter left to recall some of it.